one talks about the Black church and when one talks about the resources that course through the Black community, because there's never a Black community that is utterly bereft of resources. There are some that just don't have a lot, but they're never bereft. The Black church has largely become the place that I would describe as the Commonwealth within our communities. And what I mean by that is that it is the one institution in which Black people, and this is Black people thinking in a diasporic way, have been able to maintain and been able to manage and been able to focus the use of wealth in ways that they have not been able to in other circumstances. Wealth in terms of both economics, but also wealth in terms of culture, but wealth in terms of political issues. That means that the Black church then is always in a position where it is the presumptive holder of significant Black resources that should be made available to the Black community. So this is sort of, what becomes the challenge is because every generation of Black people who exists anywhere in the continental United States has a memory still alive in it when their forebears fled someplace else and lost everything that they had. So the memory is very much alive in places like Chicago. The memory is very much alive in places like Detroit, but it's also alive in places like Minneapolis. It's alive in places like New York, where people remember that the only thing that they brought with them were the clothes on their backs, the greasy brown paper bags, and their religion. So the first thing that they created when they got places were their churches. Many of them were storefronts or what have you. So this idea of commonwealth is one I think is deeply embedded within the Black community in terms of how to think about the church. Now, the church has been walking a very fine line. Black life in the United States has and continues to be ephemeral. We have been displaced. Our institutions have memories of being displaced. Our families have memories of being displaced. So here's the rub, and here's where the Black church walks a fine line. It's investing in communities that existentially it understands may not be there to support it 40 or 50 years down the road. The Black church is continually being asked to be a steward of the commonwealth of Black people with a deeply embedded memory that it may end up being left in a place where there are no longer any Black people and in which they have very little value in terms of what they are projecting. Now, what can end up happening, that's why certainly am so excited about what's being done with the Oikos Institute is this raising the question, well, what happens to those Black churches? Because they still are a part of the Black Commonwealth, even if they're not in a place that they can survive and sustain themselves as sort of cultural and economic centers of Black life because Black folk have been displaced. Walking that fine line between being a responsible repository, the commonwealth, if you will, of Black communities, both in terms of culture, in terms of economics, and as well as in terms of imagination for the future, when you have a deeply embedded memory that Black life is ephemeral,